Admiral, Russia is shocked and offended. Is it worth worrying about provoking Putin?
I don't think it is. First of all, these actions aren't terribly provocative. They are, in fact, a logical step continuing on what has happened in Ukraine. This started when Russia invaded Ukraine and annexed Crimea. That's made the eastern nations of NATO, the Baltic States and Poland, very nervous about Russia. Therefore, we're putting equipment there in case we have to respond. It's a way to reassure the NATO allies. It's not terribly provocative, and it is the logical next step in response to Putin's bullying and imperialism.
Admiral, the biggest concern right now are the Baltic states, where there are some Russian minorities, particularly in Estonia. How much danger, given the constant overflights and provocations they're getting from Russia, how much danger are the Baltic states actually in?
I don't think they're in significant danger, Brendan, of an actual invasion by Russia. It is highly unlikely that Russia would try to take on the NATO alliance by crossing a NATO border with armor or troops. It is possible we could see cyber attacks. We could see some kind of insurgency trying to propel the Russian minority to do acts of defamation or difficulty. But I don't think there's an enormous risk of Russian invasion. But if you talk to the Baltics, they feel it because of their history. They were part of the Soviet Union. They've been under Russian domination for centuries.
Admiral, 1997, NATO signed an agreement with Russia, no troops or equipment east of Germany. Of course, that's almost 20 years ago now, but we held to it until last year. Is that agreement worth even worrying about anymore?
It is not, in the sense that that agreement was about permanently assigned troops. That's talking about putting actual people sleeping overnight in those countries. This is different. This is moving equipment. I think there's plenty of room in that agreement for what we're doing.
Admiral, we have Charlie Rose from our network interviewing Vladimir Putin on Friday. We've got a quote here from Putin in a recent interview. He said, "Only an insane person can imagine that Russia would suddenly attack NATO." Is this insane behavior then?
No, it is behavior that reflects the historical sensibilities of particularly the Baltic states, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, but also Poland. I don't think Poland was expecting the invasion they received from Stalin before World War II, for example, or the one, frankly, from Germany the other way. So I think nations defend themselves. They're part of an alliance. They have the right to expect that alliance to support them. What I do think is insane is the way Putin is beginning to talk about nuclear weapons. He has made several references to people should not forget that Russia is a nuclear-armed state. If anybody is ratcheting up tension at this point, it's Russia.
Admiral, how can the United States assist Europe with these different turmoils, whether it's financial in Greece or it's the geopolitics of Mr. Putin? How does the U.S. project a cogent policy?
Tom, we've got to first and foremost rely on the NATO alliance and use the structures of NATO, the command structure that's built in place, all of the meetings and summits that go along with NATO. So that NATO itself is the transatlantic plane. Secondly, I'm an advocate of the Trans-Pacific, or correction, well, I am an advocate of Trans-Pacific, but also the transatlantic trade agreement, which I think is the economic piece of this. Thirdly, politically, we have to be engaged in the continent, leaning in and acting as part of the G7. And I think we're doing those things, but I think we need to put more emphasis on this Ukrainian situation. It is quite dangerous.
Admiral James Stavridis of the Fletcher School at Tufts, also former Supreme Allied Commander of NATO in Europe. Thank you very much.